Thank you so much for being here on tonight for this Dr. Harold Murphy Memorial Endowment Scholarship. This is a special time in the history of our wonderful university. Thanks so many of you who've traveled far distances to come and to share with us on this evening. I want to give a special thanks up front to our President and CEO, Dr. Dan Jones, for hosting this wonderful event for us. I'd like to call Pastor Valerie Englert, Senior Pastor of the First United Methodist Church, who will come with our invocation.
Thank you, Lavelle. Let us pray. Our loving, gracious God, we give you thanks for the opportunity and the privilege of coming together this evening to celebrate the life of one who so willingly shared of his wisdom, of his learning, of his spirit to his students and to this community. We ask that you be in the midst of our celebration and our remembrances this evening tonight, dear God. We also ask your blessing on this meal as we fellowship together. We ask your blessing on the hands that have prepared it and the earth from which it came. Amen.
Well, it's great to be here tonight, and it's particularly great to welcome all of you to this wonderful event tonight. We are surrounded by some very fortunate people. I would put myself first in that number because I am fortunate enough to be married to Jelena Jones, the First Lady of Texas A&M Commerce. Of course, the rest of you are fortunate because you worked with Dr. Harold Murphy. You either worked with him, you knew him as a colleague, a mentor, a friend, a father. in all ways an extraordinary individual, someone whose memory we celebrate and whose achievements we celebrate here tonight. Of course, I was not fortunate enough to know Dr. Harold Murphy. I did meet him, actually. I met him, coincidentally, at Dr. Harold Murphy Day, at which he was a prominent guest, and I was able to offer the welcome at that event as well. But he was active in the life of the university and, of course, in the intellectual life of his profession up until the very end, and he was just that kind of a guy. I felt I got to know him a little bit better at his funeral, and I know funerals are supposed to be somber events, but I got to tell you, his was truly a celebration. And I heard so many wonderful stories, and some of those are going to be shared here tonight. Not all of them are, ready for publication, but I did find out about his affinity for Trigger, for example. And if you don't know the reference, ask someone to explain it to you. But again, each of you were fortunate to have been part of Dr. Harold Murphy's life, and that's what draws us all together. Even though I was not so fortunate to know him, I am fortunate to be part of a university that was made better by his having been a part of it. And that truly has enriched my life and has enriched the lives of all of us. We are all fortunate to be part of this university, and I'm fortunate to work with people whose lives were enriched by Dr. Harold Murphy. He was again, as I said, a mentor, a colleague, most of all a teacher, a person who shared his vision of a better world through the mission of teaching. So I am grateful for that. And I know that one person whose life was enriched by his presence is my predecessor, Dr. Keith McFarland. Keith and Nancy, thank you for being part of this tonight. And thank you for everything that you've done for this great university.
Before we move forward, I know that there are so many individuals in here that had a wonderful time here at A&M Commerce or East Texas State University, but I would be terribly remiss if I did not acknowledge two groups that are present. And I would ask that you would just maybe stand or wave your hand if you could. I'd like to introduce our retired faculty members who are present here from the Department of Counseling, Dr. Paul Johnson, Dr. Richard Lampe, and Dr. Ruth Ann White. And those that are the current members of the Department of Counseling that are present here, if you just hold your applause until I acknowledge the presence. If you would just raise your hand, Dr. Chester Robinson, Dr. Steve Armstrong, Dr. Sam Rayburn, and Dr. Linda Ball. Thank you so much for being here on tonight. And I would like to acknowledge the presence of our Dean of the College of Education and Human Services tonight, Dr. Brent Mangus. Where is he? Thank you. I know that in putting a program of this nature together, so many individuals have wonderful stories to share, but because of the availability of time, we had to limit the number of individuals that we could actually put on the program. I'd like to call the daughters of Dr. Harold Murphy to the podium at this time, Mrs. Annette Murphy Taggart and Mrs. Sharon Murphy Anderson, who will come and share at this time. Let's receive them.
Over who gets this. You know, Dad would be a little bit embarrassed, but also very pleased at all of this tonight. Annette and I decided that our best response would be to let you know what we think Daddy might say if he were here. I think he would put nicely the nice things. I think he would put on his speech-giving voice, which used to surprise me when I was little. I'd walk in and think, where'd that come from? And he would say, I think he would say, I'm very pleased and humbled that you've chosen to honor me by creating this scholarship in my name.
Well, and then he would go on to brag on this university. He would thank everyone, and he would name several in the department who had helped him achieve his goals. He'd interject a few funny tales and comments along the way, and then he would come home. He'd sit back in his recliner chair, and he'd say, "Girls, they honored your old daddy tonight. I don't know why they would want to do such a thing, but they seem to like your old daddy."
And this was our cue to say, "Oh, Daddy, you know they love you." and then we'd start heaping on the comments, and Annette was particularly good at that.
And then he'd just sort of sit back and grin,
relishing the moment. Daddy loved this university. He spent most of his adult life here. He made lifelong connections and associations with many. When he began his work here, professors wore suits and hats to work each day. At football games, the stadium was packed. At homecoming parades, it included amazing floats. There were bands from a lot of other universities and schools here, and the lives of the faculty and staff revolved around the university.
Dad was fortunate to work with a great group of people. Earl Coyle hired him, and he worked with the guidance and counseling departments, visionaries and founding fathers, Bill Truax and John McQuarrie. Ruth Ann White, Paul Johnson, Al Hovestedt, and so many others made working in the department a place for professional collaboration, friendship, and support.
Daddy was a teacher first, and he reveled in the successes of his students. Nothing made his day more than to hear from one of his former students and to know that they had gone on to make a career and a life in the discipline he loved so much.
Well, if you knew Dad, you also knew that he wasn't afraid to speak his mind. And I'm sure that all the presidents from Jimmy G all the way through Keith McFarland have heard from Dad a time or two when he felt an issue was important to faculty or students. You could definitely count on him to give it to you straight and to let you know what the sentiments were in the university community. No need to guess. He'd just tell you. But his opinions were never personal attacks, and I believe he was respected for his honesty.
After he passed away, I really began to think a lot about, we heard a lot of stories about how he'd meant so much to so many people, and I kept trying to think, how could you put that into a nutshell, what that really meant? And I thought about this, and I thought he had a likable and caring nature, and it showed. But he also expected everyone to stand on their own 2 feet and do well and take care of themselves. But if you couldn't, he was always there with an understanding and caring way to help you along the way.
It didn't matter what your previous interactions were with him. If you were down and he knew it, he would be there by your side to help you up. And it was this caring and concern that made him the essence of who he was. And by needing him, we allowed him to be the person he was meant to be.
One specific person I would like to thank, who is not here tonight, but is the other Dr. Murphy in our family. We call her that anyway. And that's our mother, Beverly. Mama didn't mind being alone, and that allowed Daddy a lot of time to spend with others. But the other thing she did was keep him healthy, so we all had more time to enjoy him here. No matter what his health issues, and he had quite a few, she was there to study, research, and fuss over him. She took good care of him, and we say thank you to her, because without her by his side, we don't think he would have been the man that he was.
And so, in all seriousness, as Daddy would say, thank you for being a part of his life.
And thank you for helping create this scholarship will allow the essence of Harold Murphy to continue to help students achieve their goals and stand on their own.
We appreciate all that you have meant to our father and to this university, and we appreciate your part in his legacy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annette, and thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing. Each year, as you know, we would have the Murphy Day Conference on campus. And I guess the first 2 or 3 years in the department, I had a chance to chair the Murphy Day Conference. And I called Dr. Murphy the first year I was chairing, and it wasn't that well versed in who Dr. Murphy was. So I called him on the phone and said, Dr. Murphy, the conference is going to be held in February. I'm just calling to remind you and look forward to you being there. He said, oh, I may not be alive. I might not be alive. And I'm thinking, this man is telling me he's not going to be alive. And so the event came around, and I looked, and I saw Dr. Murphy at Murphy Day, and I said, well, it's good to see you. And I said, but I thought you told me you may not be alive. Oh, hell, Lavelle, I didn't die. I'm still here. He had a very unique way of reaching out to students. He had a very unique way of loving East Texas State, Texas A&M Commerce. Tonight we have three individuals who will reflect on the life and legacy of Dr. Murphy. Dr. Jack Laster, who's currently Chancellor, University of Arkansas, Monticello. Dr. Ruth Ann White, one of our retired professors from the Department of Counseling. And Mr. Jim Lewis, who's currently the Vice President of Advancement, University of Texas at Arlington. Could you please join me?
Well, someone always has to start. When Wyman called about this and was telling me the night, I said, he wanted to know if I could be here. I said, it doesn't matter. I will be here. Don't care what's going on. This is a wonderful night for us to recount many stories. And I know most of you are saying, don't let this guy start. You know how college presidents are. You've got a good one. I was with him a few weeks ago. I've seen him several times. And Dan, I don't know if you know this, I have 3 degrees from this institution, and I'm very pleased that you're in the position you are with your wonderful wife. It means a lot to me that you continue the heritage of this campus and what it does for people. Wyman, though, when I asked him, I said, now, what do you want me to talk about? He stopped for a minute, and he said, well, about 5 minutes. So I will do my best, but most of you know, having grown up in East Texas, and having received 3 degrees here, learned an awful lot. I tell people in Arkansas all the time, that's the state just to your east, if you didn't know there is a state over there. To me, hello is a 7-syllable word, so it's going to be difficult for me to get through this in 5 minutes, but I'll do my best. Several of you have come up and recounted some stories to me that I wish I could repeat tonight, but with the ladies present, I will not. I'll try to keep this suitable for a mixed audience, and I've already made several mistakes tonight in identifying people. Janet, first thing I want you to know is I do know who you are. My brain went blank, but it happens to all of us. Bob asked me to tell the Fakwari Indian story, but Bob, not tonight. Sorry about that. But I'll do my best. Most of you could probably come up and do a lot better job than I, but I will tell you what this man meant to me, and you're probably wondering about all these notes, but 2 years ago, and I don't want to get into my life story, but I had a massive stroke. I was totally paralyzed. And the reason I tell you about that, I don't want your sympathy. I'm glad to be here, glad to be standing on this side of the grass. I just think it's fortunate that I could survive it. But I've always called Harold Murphy the good doctor, and many of you also identified him the same way, the good doctor. He was always the good doctor to me. When you're in intensive care and you've got more doctors than you do probably years in life or whatever, I mean, they were everywhere. It's amazing how a man that has meant so much to my life could find out that I had had that stroke. And he was one of the first to call my room. I couldn't talk to him. I could not talk at the time. Could not swallow, could not move. And the good doctor called to say, get well soon. And that recounted to me why I've always said good doctor. It wasn't just the fact that he educated me, and I appreciate the education he gave me, but it was the caring he had for people that I will always remember. The good doctor. Let me tell you a few things, and I was asked to tell a few humorous stories. But it's truly an honor to be here tonight and to be able to tell you a few things that I remember about my mentor, my professor, the dean and friend, Harold D. Murphy, or as I've already told you, the good doctor. One of his daughters tonight, and I won't mention, but you can figure this out, has a child in school, and no, it's not Mary, so you can probably figure out who might be the one we're talking about. But she said her son was off at college and was having a little problem deciding on a major. She thought maybe partying and having a good time was the major that he had for the first 2 years in college. I said, well, now, isn't that amazing? That's what I started in at East Texas State. And she said, well, what changed your mind? I said, Harold D. Murphy. And she said, well, tell me what he used to change your mind. And I said, well, your dad used to talk to all of us about travel, that we could travel, and if we liked rice, we'd get to eat a lot of rice. It was called Vietnam. And he had a way of convincing us that college was where we needed to be. I'm the first in my family to attend college. I'm proud of that fact, and I repeat it several times over because this institution, Dan, as you and I have talked, still serves a large population of first-generation students, a very, very critical mission this institution has. I'm fortunate to be at one very similar. 60% of our freshman class this year are the first in their family to attend college. It's hard to believe that we still have that many. But the story that I want to tell about Harold Murphy, I got to know him quite well, being president of a fraternity that, Dan, I understand you want to buy the fraternity house. It sits right across the street from this building. When it was built, it was not that close to campus. Campus has grown toward it. But being president for 2 years, I had frequent occasion to visit the dean's office. Matter of fact, it got to be almost a weekly appointment. And I'll never forget, Harold had a way of expressing himself, and I won't use all of his expressions, but that cigar that you saw in the picture earlier, and let me just use my pen. I didn't bring a cigar with me. I don't have props. He had that thing, yes, you could smoke in the office, and he'd have it rolling around in his mouth, and I would walk in, and he'd say, well, sport, that was, the name he called everybody. Sport, y'all have done it again. Sport, you've done it again. Every week, we had done it again. So finally, toward the end of the term, he finally got, I guess, irritated, tired of the continual problems that the fraternity was having, and I couldn't do anything about it. I was trying my best. Believe me, Dean, I was trying hard. He finally brought me in one day, and he said, Sport, I'm going to tell you, one time, he said, I want you to go back to that fraternity house and tell those young men that they're to put their foot at the bottom of the cross. And if they should ever take a step away, the wrath of Harold D. Murphy will strike down upon them. So at chapter meeting that week, I repeated that, and within a year, we were the number one chapter on campus. So I think Harold got his point across. Again, I could ramble, and that's the reason I put these notes up here to keep you from being bored. I guess the thing that I will always remember and appreciate about him, though, is that Harold Murphy was the true teacher. That was his profession. The faculty and staff of this institution realized he had a passion for what he was doing. He taught not only in the classroom, and yes, he taught statistics, and for those of us that had him as a major professor, I have 12 hours, Paul, on my transcript in statistics. Could not add 2 and 2 right now if I had to. Remember to this day that I was fortunate enough to buy a calculator. Now, some of you that are younger are going to think I'm talking about 1940, but I bought a calculator that was refurbished from Texas Instrument for $380. That calculator right now doesn't cost $10 at the dollar store. I mean, times have changed. But Harold, you've already heard Dan, and I've got to tell you this. Dan was real nice to me. He sat down and he said, now, what are you going to talk about tonight? And I said, well, here's my notes. He's already stolen half of what I was going to tell you. But Trigger is very famous with Harold Murphy. Trigger was the person or the individual that he constantly told you about in statistics. And he would virtually say, ladies and gentlemen, he said, I'm a master at teaching statistics. I even taught Trigger statistics. It was so easy that Trigger would paw out the answer with his front hoof. He said, that's how easy statistics is. And then when Harold had a final exam or an exam in statistics, he'd say, now, I don't mind. He said, you can bring any person you want. He said, you can bring a Catholic priest. Ruth Ann, we had a student then in my class that was a Catholic priest. He said, you can bring Trigger with you. You can bring your book. It doesn't matter. I have prepared an exam, and this was his other favorite saying. He would walk into the classroom and say, ladies and gentlemen, I have an exam here that's very fair. A one-eyed baboon or blind jackass could pass it. And then for some reason he'd turn to me and say, Mr. Laster, that ought to give you a fair chance at this exam. But anyway, Trigger accompanied me on my comprehensive exam in statistics. My son had a little horse, and it's set up on the desk. I had my calculator, I had my textbook, and I brought our Catholic priest to the exam with me. It didn't do any good, but I brought all the props that I was supposed to have. But let's talk again about his teaching. He taught not only in the classroom, he taught in any location. Harold Murphy, I did this calculation. I think if you went back and checked the records, there's about 100 of you here tonight, but probably in his career at this institution, in a classroom, he taught over 9,000 students. 9,000 students. I'm in a community right now that barely has 9,000 people. Now, I know you've heard the saying, it takes a village to educate a person. I would say to you, Harold Murphy educated the village, and it now has turned over many and many times. If you come to my campus, and I would invite you to come to the home of the boll weevils, and I know most of you have never seen a boll weevil, but it's a wonderful mascot, and there ain't nothing more evil than a damn boll weevil. But if you come to the campus today, I guarantee you can walk across that campus and mention the name of Harold D. Murphy, and people will say, oh, the good doctor? Oh, Dr. Murphy? Dean Murphy? Because I am constantly reminding people of the lessons I learned at the foot of the Master. And he was a fabulous teacher. I'm a perfect example. It did take me 3 different degrees here, but I eventually made it through and got to the point where I am now. And I would not stand before you today if it had not been for Harold D. Murphy, the good doctor. He was a friend that you could always count upon. And even though his opinion or outlook may have differed, he still listened to you and gave you opportunity to express your opinion, even if he thought it was wrong, and he always valued his relationship with you as a friend and never hesitated to tell you when you were wrong. In higher education, a faculty member like Harold Murphy never treated his profession as a job or work. Teaching was a passion, and one in which he gave total effort to the art of teaching. His colleagues never questioned his passion. He loved what he had chosen early in life as a profession, and he was recognized for his zeal and commitment to the art of teaching. He not only imparted wisdom, but he had a way of expressing himself that made a lasting memory and encouraged you to achieve greater goals. How can we ever forget his teaching? Finally, the largest number of individuals will always remember and value the time they knew Harold Murphy as their professor. We are his former students, and all of us owe Harold for who we are and where we are today. Teaching for Harold Murphy, the good doctor, was coaching, leading, guiding, telling, showing, mentoring, or modeling. No one in his classroom ever doubted his passion for teaching and his genuine concern for his students. He wanted everyone in his classroom to learn and appreciate the subject, not just to pass the course. And as a teacher, you're often asked to provide your teaching philosophy. In developing a statement, 2 important questions that you must answer are why do you teach or want to teach, and what do you get out of it? Harold Murphy students, all of us, will tell you that he taught because he loved the opportunity he was given to improve the lives of his students. And what he got out of it was the reward of knowing that he played a part in helping them to know how to learn, and through learning a subject, they would improve their future and in turn the future of our society. Harold Murphy, I could speak for hours, but as I said, Wyman, I'll try to keep it short. He would not want me to preach tonight because I'm not a preacher. And Harold was a very religious man. A lot of people did not know that about him. But he's the reason I became a Presbyterian. But I'm not going to preach tonight, and the good doctor would not want me to, but I will tell you a story that you all know. If you believe in a life after death, it is said that when that time comes, you will be asked questions at the gate. And imagine one question that was asked of Harold when he arrived was, who are you and what did you accomplish in your life on earth? And I'm sure that Harold simply answered, I was a teacher, and the response he received is, welcome and good job, my son. I want to close with a verse that I know you've heard, but I think it's very fitting in recounting Harold D. Murphy. It's called In Memory of a Master Teacher. A builder built a temple. He built it with care and skill. Pillars and arches were fashioned to meet his will. And men said when they saw its beauty, it shall never know decay. Great is thy skill, O builder. Thy fame shall endure for ages. A teacher built a temple. He built it with skill and care, forming each pillar and with patience, laying each stone with care. None saw the unceasing effort, none knew of the marvelous plan. For the temple the teacher built was unseen by the eyes of man. Gone is the builder's temple, crumbled into dust, pillars and arches, food for consuming rust. But the temple the teacher built shall endure while the ages roll, for the beautiful unseen temple was the student's immortal soul. Thanks, good doctor, for the memories, sharing your wisdom with us, and your commitment to your students and your masterful use of the art of teaching. You will be missed, but always remembered as the good doctor. In closing, this is the commercial, I guess. I'm not supposed to do this maybe, but Wyman and I were talking earlier. How do we continue this gathering tonight? My suggestion is that we all make a commitment because of the man that did so much for us. I'm not asking about a check. I'll give my check later, Randy, wherever you are. But I'm talking about just coming once a year to an event like this and bringing at least one more Harold D. Murphy product with you. I think that's our way of showing to this man what he meant to all of us. Thank you very much. You notice Lavelle made us come up and speak. There's only 3 chairs, so he just keeps skipping over and over. Oh, am I moving?
Yes. That's a hard act to follow. When I was invited to be a part of this evening honoring Harold, I immediately said yes. Later, I began to ask myself, what are you going to say? Everyone in this room could talk about Harold for hours without repeating the same story, because there's no end to the stories that live on about Harold. Some of the stories have grown, and others have been modified to meet or to fit the current audience. The thing is, each of these stories is told with love and pride from having shared the experience of knowing and working with Harold Murphy. In trying to find a way to sum up my 50-plus years that I have known Harold, that I knew Harold, the word colleague kept coming up. Colleague, a fellow member of a professional staff or academic faculty, an associate. And the synonym they gave was partner. That seemed to fit Harold to a T. So, I'm going to spell it out for you so you won't have any doubts. C, consistent in character, regardless of what his assigned role was, whether it was as a teacher, a committee member, a major professor, or the dean of men, he was always the same. O, he was open to new ideas and open to change. He was outgoing and friendly, and he never met a stranger. I remember the time that he started this conversation with a taxi driver in, Chicago or somewhere. I thought this taxi driver was going to dinner with us that night. L, loyal. He was loyal to the ideas of the counseling profession, the customs and traditions of education, and he was also faithful to each one of us in this room. Then there's another L. He was a leader at the university. I think he was the first president of the Faculty Senate. In the professional organizations, he was the president of the State Counselors Association. In the community, he was the president of the Chamber of Commerce. And in his church, he was an elder and a deacon and a Sunday school teacher. E, he was emotionally aware, and he was not afraid to own his own feelings, and he was always considerate of the feelings of others. Although he denied being a touchy-feely counselor. A, he was attentive to his personal and professional responsibilities, to the individuals and groups. He took care of business. G, he was generous with his time and his energy. When you were with Harold, you had his full attention. Harold Murphy always found the time to talk to his fellow teachers or to talk to a parent who was concerned about maybe one of Jack's friends when he was a little boy. And there was always time for just one more question from the nervous doctoral student about the research design or the statistics. U, he was unique. There is, has been, and will only be one Harold D. Murphy. E, he was an educator in the largest sense of the word. He wanted his students to learn and to enjoy the value of the process of learning just as much as he did. Harold Murphy modeled all of these characteristics for us. Your presence at this event says that you want to extend Harold's legacy for future graduate students through a scholarship bearing his name. Thank you.
Well, I was going to do the thing about colleague, but I didn't know how to spell colleague, so I'm glad I didn't try and do that. I'm not really sure why I was chosen to speak tonight. I think if Harold were alive, he'd say, "Hell, Lewis, why the hell did they pick you? You going to talk about your feelings?" I mean, there are probably 1,000 people who knew Harold D. Murphy better than me, but maybe the reason I'm here is I'm one of those 9,000 students that he taught over the years. Maybe I'm sort of representative of the overall group, because he was my major professor both as an undergraduate and as a graduate student. And it is ironic that these two people are speaking here tonight. Ruth Ann White was my sugar mama when I was a student here. I was a student director of the Listening Ear, the Crisis Intervention Center, and it was funded by Student Affairs, and she was vice president for Student Affairs. So I used to go and ask Ruth Ann for money, and like legions of other women on this campus, she told me no. But it was my first try at fundraising, actually. So that's how I learned to take no for an answer. Jack Lassiter was a doctoral student when I was doing my master's here, and I got an interview and eventually ended up at University of Arkansas at Monticello. And when I went for my finalist interview, Jack and his wife Judy and their son Jay took me in their van to Monticello for that interview. So talk about personal treatment. I'll never forget that. It was a great trip there. Of course, Jack left as soon as I got there, and oddly enough, came back as soon as I left. I don't know what that's about. Harold Murphy, I don't know what to add to what's been said. He was a very unusual mentor to me. I am very appreciative of the time I knew him as a student. I was very appreciative to have kept up with him primarily through email in recent years. I remember the first time I ever met him, I showed up sight unseen. I was going to transfer as a junior, and with the intention of finishing my undergraduate degree and doing a master's in counseling, and had gone to another institution I won't name, which has a counseling program in North Texas, and kind of I don't know, it was kind of they were kind of stiff over there, you know. And I came over here, and I just walked in. I hadn't made an appointment or anything, and they sent me to Harold D. Murphy's office. And he was like, "Well, hell, man, let's see what we can do for you," you know. And I thought, "Man, this is okay," you know. I also got to know Harold because for 2 years I sang in the choir at First Presbyterian Church here as a student. And, of course, you know, both Harold, my major professor, and John McQuarrie, the head of our department, were in that church. And I think that's coincidental to my being named a Truax Fellow later that year as a master's student. Had nothing to do with it, I'm sure. Harold was a contrarian, and he would teach you to think that way. It's funny how you remember little snippets of things that happened. One time I don't know how it even came up, but it being a liberal student, I made some comment that I was sure he would agree with that had to do with right-wing fundamentalist Christian. And he said, "You know, Lewis," he said, "when somebody's a fan of a football program, they're a fanatic. They think that's okay to be that way. But if they're a fanatic for religion, something's wrong with it." And I thought, wow, I never had really thought about it that way before. But he was, you know, he always took the opposite view to make you think. He really did. I saw him a few years later when early on in my career, I found I was a lousy counselor, wasn't any good working with students, so I did the only thing left to do, and I became a fundraiser. And I had taken a job at Perkins School of Theology at SMU as Director of Development and saw him at a Truax banquet. And I told him my news, what I had just done. He said, "Hell, Lewis, you're a huckster for the Lord. I love it." I'll never forget that. That was the first thing out of his mouth. You know, and I thought later, if you take out the drawl, there's a lot of W.C. Fields in there. Like, oh, yeah, you know. But in a lot of ways, Harold D. Murphy was like George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. You know the story. Clarence the angel showed him what life would have been like without him, and the lives that were touched. And wow, and there are literally thousands of lives who have been touched by Harold Murphy. And those people continue, as Jack said, to see that his legacy continues because they touch lives, and it's geometric. It's really astounding when you think about the influence he had over the number of people and how they in turn are influencing tens of thousands of people. So, you know, I think tonight is about paying it forward, right? I mean, he's got quite a legacy here What the university would like to see, what I would like to see, all of us would like to see, is to create this endowment to honor this person who's done so much for students so that his name can live on and continue to impact the lives of future students. So we got a chance to vote with our wallets, basically is what it comes down to. It's not a matter of how much you give, but it is a matter of how much you give in relationship to your ability to give. So I would just ask you, as a fellow alumnus and a commerce person, to really give some thought to that, to reflect on what this person has meant to you, how you would like to see him remembered here, and then make some sort of commitment that you think is commensurate with the impact he had on your life and the way we can continue to impact the lives of future students. I came here and I met my wife here. I met my best friend here. My best friend met his wife here. This is a family. That's been part of the ethos of this place, I guess, since the beginning. And Harold Murphy was very much a member of my family. And I am so pleased to be a part of honoring him tonight, and I hope you will join me and others in honoring him through this graduate scholarship. Thanks a lot.
Jack Lester asked the question, is it time to leave? He said he had another hour worth of speaking. Please, again, join me in thanking these individuals for sharing their stories tonight. Prior to Wyman Williams coming, I do want to thank those that were instrumental in putting this event together tonight. I want to begin by thanking you, Randy Van Dieden, our Vice President of Institutional Advancement. Thank you for allowing your staff to come together to make this happen. We appreciate that very much. Also, committee members Wyman Williams, Brenda Morris. Is Brenda in? Brenda, please stand. Brenda, thank you. Stephanie Ficioria, can't say it correctly. Alicia Wilcock, and our Director of Alumni Relations, if you'd also stand, please, Daryl Peace. Let's thank these individuals. Daryl Peace did remind me that he had the spirit of Hal Murphy living in him. I asked Daryl to stand. He said, I'm going to be a contrarian and not stand. So thank you so much, very much, Daryl. Wyman Williams.
Thank you, Lavelle. I'd rather keep this in this room, if you would, because there might be someone that disagrees with me, but I have the most fun job on this campus. I am a director of development, and I have been privileged to work with several people developing this dinner tonight, and I can tell you it has been a delight. I want to thank Lavelle for his inspiration and being a part of this. I want to thank Ruth Ann, Paul and Norma Johnson, of course Annette and Sharon for their help, but it has been fun. I attempted to call everyone who was a doctoral graduate with Harold as the committee chair. I didn't get all of them, but I got more than half. And I tell you what, when we got to talking, the stories wouldn't end. And it was just so much fun. I can't tell you how much fun it was. Our endowment that we have begun as of yesterday afternoon has reached the $15,000 mark. That's from 0 to 15,000. What we're hoping for is to produce 100,000 because that will generate enough earnings in a year to fully support a doctoral student in counseling. So that's what we're looking for, and we're going to continue to work toward it. Let me tell you an experience we had, and Harriet and I had the honor of visiting with a couple in Austin. So, the name has already been mentioned. His name is Earl Coyle, and his wife Carmen. Some of you remember that name. Earl came to Commerce in 1947. Dr. Jimmy G. had hired him to begin the program in student personnel and guidance, and he was here through 1956. He and his wife are in their 90s. They're still living independently. They both drive, and they're delightful people. Well, something Earl said that was interesting. He said the best thing I did in Commerce is that I hired Beverly Murphy first. And then I hired Harold, and then Bill Truax, and then John McQuarrie. So he started the program, and he made a comment that I thought was very kind. He said, of all the places that he and Carmen have lived and worked, his memories of Commerce are among his fondest. And it was just a delight to find him and to hear his stories of Commerce back with Dr. G. Now, something I have learned in my year, a little bit more than a year of being a director of development, is that we have some ET grads that don't understand us today. Can you imagine that? You say, I'm from A&M Commerce. Well, I don't know where that is. I don't know what it is. Don't want to know. Well, what I need you to do is when you run into an ET grad that doesn't understand what's happening here today, one thing I'd like for you to invite them to campus and look around. But if you would say to them that East Texas State is not only alive and well, it's thriving. We call it by a different label, but let me assure you, the new label helps us get money from the legislature. And if you don't believe it, drive around campus. Folks, it's a wonderful thing for students what our association with A&M, the A&M system has brought about. So don't say that East Texas State is gone. It's alive and well. And let's be proud of our 15-year relationship with a strong system in this state. And they really do help us produce fine programs and buildings for students. Okay, this evening is not about to end when we close this dinner. We have reserved the club downstairs for those of you who would like to stay and visit. And we'll stay with you as long as you want to stay. So don't stand around here and think it's over. I would love for you to relocate. The club is down the hallway directly in front of the elevator, and it's your first right. They have beverage available for purchase, and we would love for you to come down there. Our photographer has agreed to stay a little longer, and if you'd like some group pictures or whatever, we'll do that. These pictures will all be on Flickr in a few days, so you can look back and download those. Well, I do thank you for being here, and please tell those ET grads that we're still doing what was done for us. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Wyman. I'd like to call Dr. Steve Armstrong prior to our closing to make a comment. Dr. Steve Armstrong.
You may notice that I wasn't on the program. I twisted Lavelle's arm to let me come up here for just a minute to say a little bit about the doc program. Wyman said a minute ago he had the best job on campus, and actually I do. I just wanted you to know we have in our department, I've been the coordinator of the doc program for the past 3 years. We have some great doc students, and it's wonderful to get a chance to interact with them. And I wanted to relate just a couple of things to Harold. I won't talk long in case you're wondering. I wasn't asked to tell stories, but I will tell us one story about Harold. We had a golf tournament a few years ago as a fundraiser for our department, and I got to play with Harold. And after at this stage, it was about 5 years ago, and he couldn't hit the ball very far. And after every drive, he would say pretty much the same thing. "Damn it, that's pitiful." That was his comment. The funny thing is, we were playing best ball. He could putt better than anyone in my group. We used his putt every hole. And we did well, came tied for first, but anyway. Let me say a little bit about our program. When students are admitted into our doc program, it is not enough for them to be bright and dedicated. They must also be the kind of people who make good counselors. When I teach and supervise advanced students, I stress to them that being a counselor is more than doing what counselors do. It's about being and becoming a certain kind of person. A person who genuinely cares about other people, who aspires to walk in their shoes and accept their imperfections. For those of us in this room who were lucky enough to know Harold, I think we would all agree, and many other people have said this, that one of his strengths was genuineness. I never found anything fake about him. If he thought I was full of it when he was talking to me, he would tell me. In my one-on-one talks with him, and there weren't near enough, I wasn't as lucky as some of you. I was never his student, didn't even meet him until 2003. I knew he was interested in me, and I think Ruth Ann mentioned that a minute ago. It wasn't an act. He was interested in other people, and he was someone other people could trust and respect. We want our doctoral students to be people who others trust and respect. We want them to be bright, innovative, and creative, but we also want them to relate to people in some of the same ways that Harold did. Being a counselor is not about playing a role, it's about genuinely caring about the person across from you. If Harold is hearing any of this, I'm not sure what he would think, but I do know that being real is something he valued. As we honor him tonight, I want you to know that we will be looking for the kind of students that Harold would have appreciated and respected. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Steve mentioned that his name was not on the program, and he wanted to make a comment. And I said, well, you know, we have a guided program here. And he reminded me that he's doing my annual faculty evaluation. So I graciously yield to his request. I do want to say again in closing, Annette, Sharon, when we approached the two of you about establishing this scholarship, this endowment in your dad's honor, you graciously agreed. You enthusiastically supported the idea. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate that very much. I would be terribly remiss. Dr. Al Hooverstad and Dr. Pat Love, where are you, please? Thank you so much for being here. Over the years, I've had a chance to read many student affairs books because that's one of the areas in counseling that I teach. But when I hear the names of Don Creamer and Jack Laster and some of these other individuals, it's so rewarding to know that they came right through this wonderful university. When you think about the American Counseling Association, Texas Counseling Association, Southern Affairs Counseling, NASPA, National Association for Student Personnel Administrators, the names, John McQuarrie, Harold Murphy, Paul Johnson, Ruth Ann White, Bill Troth, Bob Gold, Richard Lampy, David Arlington Talbot Roberts Sr., Morag Harris. It's wonderful to know that even though these are local, state, national, and international organizations, the faculty members from the Department of Counseling here at our wonderful university were the cornerstones of its existence. The rich tradition will continue here at Texas A&M Commerce. Thank you so much for coming, and please have a safe travel back home. Thank you.